it's almost like when you ramble, if you just keep talking and talking, at some point you end up saying things that you didn't know you were thinking about. So therapy's so good. It's that same experience. It's like it just unlocks bits of your mind, I feel like, that you're not always tapped into. It's fun.
Welcome to Season 2 of Making Conversation with me, Grant Brydon. On this podcast, I've been sitting down with some of my favourite artists and thinkers to discuss creativity and life. For this episode, I spoke to musical adventurer Biig Piig as she was preparing for the release of her debut mixtape, Bubblegum. At the end of last year, the nomadic artist joined me at Levi's Haus of Strauss to discuss moving into a new home, making music that connects with humanity, and navigating chaos in an upside-down world. If you enjoy this podcast, then please subscribe on your preferred podcast provider, and please check out my book, Life Lessons from Hip Hop, which is available from all good booksellers.
I'm kind of coming home to myself a bit, which is cool. I guess that's been on my mind a lot. I'm about to move into a place on my own, which would be nice. So I feel like I guess like the chaos of life and touring and like doing all of that, it's incredible and I love it so much. But I feel like landing somewhere and being like, this is my, I don't know, feels like coming home. Right. It's nice. Yeah. I've missed London a lot. So yeah, it feels good. And even to be at the shows and be like, it's like a reintroduction back into everything. It's just like, yeah, it feels like a new place. I also feel older with it, a bit more together with myself, I think. I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting actually, because I noticed when I was sort of reading through old interviews and stuff, a lot of the time they start with you've moved into a new place. So it's quite funny to hear you start this interview like that.
The same way. Yeah, I guess I'm just constantly moving. Always been on the move. And I guess it like comes back to that thing of like, I don't know if it's just not been like, it's just been how it's meant to be, where I'm just like constantly not really settled. But it feels like for the first time I'm actually going to be settled for a while. And I'm really excited for that. Because I feel like, I don't know, rerouting and restarting and everything else is something I'm so used to now. Where it's like, it's great and there's things that come from it, which I love. Learning about new places and meeting new people and always starting fresh. But I guess like the stuff that you end up kind of not running away from, but being a bit more like, it's a new chapter. So I feel like I've kind of started to be able to sit with those thoughts a bit more and a bit more like, I'm ready just to stop running. Do you know what I mean? So it feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think's brought you to that place? Because I guess it feels like traveling has been always part of your life and sort of moving around and stuff, and it feels like, I guess, every era, every new release comes with a new move and a new and a change. And so I wondered what has got you to this place now of this more settled feeling.
Sense of being. I don't know, I really don't know. I think it's like probably a mixture of things. Maybe like kind of coming into myself a bit more and feeling more like I can sit with myself. I think I probably got there by just, I don't know. I think my lifestyle is different. I'm not as reckless, I think, as I used to be.
Right.
Which is good. And yeah, I feel like I understand myself a bit more. And really, I guess like, especially doing a lot of shows and doing a lot of being in new places all the time, I've kind of been desperate for that sanctuary that is like home, which I feel like maybe I haven't really understood before. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think it's like, I'm so excited to build that for myself. Just like to have somewhere where it's like, even if life is chaotic or even if things are moving a lot and everything else, like this is the one place that stays and you can really, it's constant. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because I feel like sometimes I look for that in different places, whether it be like a person or I don't know, a feeling that you're chasing or whatever else. And I think like, I guess I've realized like through various relationships too and everything else where I've like got to a point now where I'm like, okay, actually none of that is sustainable. I think, I don't know, I've kind of just realized like it has to come from me giving it to myself and not looking for it in other places.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, because everything's always moving and...
Yeah. I don't know, I'm excited to kind of get into that relationship with myself finally, I think.
You mentioned like getting older, which I thought was interesting because I guess your first 3 sort of EPs sort of chronicle that move from teens to like early adulthood, and then because you're performing live, I guess you're constantly revisiting that time.
Yeah.
What is that sort of like to be on stage and going back to a previous, because I guess for a lot of us we can just sort of forget and move on from then, whereas you do have to keep going back to it all of the time.
I guess like I remember it used to be difficult before. I think as well like my whole relationship with live has changed, whereas I feel like when I started playing live I was always very scared of playing live.
Okay.
And very like exactly that, like there's tracks in those set lists and stuff and still that I play now that I just feel like I look at differently, whereas when I started doing it, it was like you'd play it and it would completely transform, like it would just, you'd go completely back in time to that moment when you're doing it. And I was scared of the crowd and very shy to be on stage, and it almost felt like exposing. Whereas like when I do it now, I guess I reflect more on it in the way of like the things that have come from it that have been great, rather than like following the rabbit hole of like sinking into it, which has been helpful. Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird relationship, I guess, when it comes to that. But I feel like I've got to a point where I'm like playing live. Yeah, there are definitely moments in those songs. I think like it's important to take a breath before going into it. Like there's tracks like Brydon and stuff where it's like those songs will never be like tracks that I play live and don't think about where I was when I wrote that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't like, I don't know. I think now it's like I can do that, but I can do it in a way that feels like I'm proud of myself for getting past it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than losing myself in it.
Okay. So you're not being like absorbed now by the song.
Yeah, it's not like picking a scab. It's more like helping a wound a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it still hurts, but it's like, I don't know, it's healing rather than being hurtful. Yeah.
What does it feel like with some of those songs because I guess once you release a song, it becomes everybody else's.
Yeah.
And it's that weird thing where they'll project things onto the song that you didn't intend for it. And so I guess there's a lot of sort of emotional exchange between you and the crowd. What does that feel like for you with stuff that's so personal that you've released? I
feel like it's just, it kind of reassures a lot. Like I remember like that's kind of the way that I found music in my relationship with it when I started off, was like I remember this Ben Harper track, and it was like the one that really cemented things for me in the way that like I understand what music's about and what it means and what it's for. And it's like he was singing about a relationship, and I was 14, I had no idea what a relationship was, but it's like I thought of it as my relationship with my mom and like the feeling of isolation and everything else, and like that kind of thing, where he was talking about that with a person he was in love with, and it made so much sense to me in my context, and it brought me so much comfort and so much more like, I just really thought like, how does this man know about my life? Do you know what I mean? And it's just kind of like, I think to sing songs, but to like go and be able to perform songs that mean a heavy thing for me, but knowing that when you're singing it back, it means something to you as well. That's the bridge. I guess that's when I feel like, okay, this is what it's meant for. Do you know what I mean? And it helps.
Okay.
Yeah, it just feels good, to be honest. But
Is it ever difficult though, I guess, because your audience, as you said, like reassure you, does that ever then make it difficult to work out what's yours and what is them putting back onto you, if you know what I mean?
I feel like it's the same way if you've got, say you've had an experience and you tell it to a friend or a room full of people, and people come back with like, oh, I understand that, or oh, I relate to that, and they mightn't relate exactly the same way, but that in itself is like a comfort.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's also like, I don't know, it means it can live beyond like an isolated experience. It goes and it lives in so many different pockets and experiences. I think it's yeah.
And the thing you've made, I guess, is able to then help other people in
You'd hope.
all sorts of ways that you'd never imagined it probably.
Yeah, I think when I get messages sometimes of like people that send them through and say, hey, this like really helped with a hard time, or this really helped me get through this breakup or this relationship, and it's like, it just feels like, yeah, it feels like you're bonded through that. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I just, yeah, it makes me glad that it has done that.
Yeah.
Because if it didn't, I'd be a bit upset. I think
Yeah.
like all this shit. But yeah.
Does it ever end up feeling like a responsibility to other people? Or are you able to sort of, when you're creating, are you able to separate yourself from the audience and just make what you want to make?
To be honest, I feel like I've never really brought the audience into the studio. Do you know what I mean? That kind of way. I feel like when you're making something, or when I've made something anyways, with producers that I work with, we just kind of roll with it and like let it all kind of fall out. And then if you end up with a great, like you end up with the song that you love at the end of it, like I just think once you start thinking too much about who's going to listen to this and what are they going to think and then you start to like almost mold it too much.
Yeah.
You don't allow it to just do its thing.
Yeah.
Which is what I feel like is special about it. Is that it kind of takes a life of its own.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I read that you sort of, and I don't know if this is still the case, but that you like to be in the studio with the producer rather than sort of getting a beat and sitting right into it.
Well, I used to do that.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I started off.
Okay.
Was finding beats on YouTube and then on SoundCloud and then writing over those at home. And it used to make me really nervous to even like think about writing with anyone else in the room. But then I started working with, I think it was Zach Nahom was one of my first people that I got in the studio with, where we actually sat down, like he'd play around with some stuff, start making the instrumental, and then I'd start writing. And it's like, I think now that I've got a taste of what that's like, I love it. And I just love bouncing off someone and being able to like, I don't know, like it's just a different energy, I think, when you find the right relationship with it. Not to say I still don't like writing on my own, I definitely do. Like 405 was written when, like that track, for example, was like a beat sent over, and that was the first time in ages that I'd written like at home. And then just went and recorded it. And that felt really good. But there is something to be said for being like, just sharing that with someone when you're in the room, I think is really like, just fun, to be honest. Yeah. And it takes a certain amount of vulnerability, I feel like, as well. You just gotta really trust each other in that setting.
How difficult was it then to, because you said when you were writing at home, you were scared to be with anyone else writing. How did you manage to sort of find that?
It took a fucking lot of trial and error, to be honest. Because the thing is, not all the time are you going to come out with a track that you love.
Yeah.
And even with like Zach, I remember the first 2 sessions, I'm like, don't you ever dare play any one of those tracks. I swear to God. Like he's got them. Yeah, he could blackmail me with those tracks so easily. I'm just like, some of the worst songs ever written. But it's like, I guess you got to trust enough that like you feel something with someone. You're like, I know that we've got it there somewhere. It's just not these songs, but it'll come. And I think like you just got to let go of like the feeling of being embarrassed. The minute that you start to feel a bit like shameful of an idea, or a little bit like, oh, I don't know, is that cringy? Like, I think that's already just trying to control too much what it looks like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of be unafraid to make mistakes, basically.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it sounds like the way that you kind of work is that you make stuff and then you kind of like come back and evaluate it later and decide what is going out, what's working and what's not. I read something where you'd sort of said that sometimes you're writing and you don't really know what it's about until you listen back to it later.
A lot of the time it's like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like you're just kind of in a train of thought and you're writing and like you understand kind of, like you obviously understand where you're going, I guess, with it. But then you look back and you read it and you're like, oh, that's what was going on. Or that's what, subconsciously I feel like a lot of things like feed into it. Where it's almost like when you ramble, if you just keep talking and talking, at some point you end up saying things that you didn't know you were thinking about. Do you know what I mean? So therapy's so good. It's that same experience. It's like just going into that kind of stream of consciousness and then afterwards being able to read back and being like, okay, you're either like still thinking about someone that you lost, or it just unlocks bits of your mind, I feel like, that you're not always tapped into. It's fun.
So you have to be able to allow the subconscious to come out in front of the person that you're with, I guess, and that's what makes it so vulnerable.
Exactly. I think like some of the worst sessions I've been in have been ones where it's like it's just too much formula. Right. Whenever anyone's like, right, we need a verse and a chorus and a pre and a bridge, and then what does that mean and where's the catchy da-da-da? I'm like, I'm off, I'm out. Like I can't, just because it's like you've taken the magic out of it then. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I feel like when you try and structure something that's not supposed to be, I feel like it's just supposed to write itself in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like you just go with it and like don't think about how it's supposed to end up or how anyone's going to listen to it or how it's going to sit with this and this. It's like just let it be its thing and it will work, I think. Yeah. And if it doesn't, that's fine. I think once all of those rules come in to a place that's like beautiful for the fact that there's no rules, it's like it kind of poisons it a little bit. Yeah.
So what does the writing process look like? Are you sat there like physically writing stuff down, or are you in a studio just recording it, or what's it like?
So usually if I'm in, for example, with Zach or another producer, they'll start kind of playing around with drum sounds or a synth or bass guitar or whatever, and then we'll kind of like we'll feel it out, but like, that feels good, let's go there. And then he'll start creating the instrumental, and while he's doing that I've got a mic and usually like mumbling melodies around until I'm like, right, that's where it is, and then just start writing to that, and I'll keep writing, and then while he's producing that, and usually by the end of it we've met at a point where my bits and his bits
And do you tend to show up to the studio with some stuff in mind that you want to never?
No, I feel like that's another thing that like freaks me out, is that I just can't I can't do that. I feel like because it's another thing. I feel like whenever because I've heard of people that go in with lyrics before or anything else, I think it's incredible, but just like for me it's like I couldn't, just because again it feels like we've already decided what it is and we're not capturing the moment. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So you're not going to show up and be like, today I'm going to write a song about this thing.
No.
It's just whatever comes out once you're in the space.
Yeah, exactly.
And so is it a case of like you're recording a lot in order to get to the things that you're looking for, or do you tend to have quite a good sort of hit rate, I guess, of like
to be honest, it's not been bad. Yeah, I think when I'm in the flow of it, I mean obviously it's always, there are moments where it doesn't work, but you kind of know within the first while whether or not it's a day to write. Do you know what I mean? I feel like sometimes you'll go and you'll get some ideas down, but you're like, it's just not clicking today. Yeah. But for the most part, we always end up with a track at the end of it. It's like a big old Dropbox folder somewhere with like all the music. Yeah.
Do you ever return to some of the stuff that you didn't and like work back into it, or is it kind of, you do?
Yeah, we do that. I think Feels Right we did that with.
Right.
And that was with me, Zach and Maverick Sabre, because he co-wrote on that as well. We all got in the room and there was like, what do we have? I think we had a verse and the chorus. And then we were like, okay, we'll leave it there. Because it feels good and we're not going to keep messing with it. It feels really good there. And then we came back to it a while later and again caught the same vibe and finished it. It was good. But sometimes that happens, yeah. It gives me the fear a little bit to do that, just because sometimes you'll go in, and if you're on a really good thing, it's like a balance, I feel like, because if you've found the pocket and you've found like, okay, it feels like we're on the train now, they can go one to two ways. Either you've got some of it out and you're like, I want to finish it, but it's just not, I don't know what is next, or I don't know what it needs, but I really want to finish it. And I think there's like a thing of, I don't know, like really pushing it sometimes as well. I feel like if it feels like it's done, not done, but if it feels like that's as much as it wants to reveal right now, then I feel like it's important to be like, okay, I'll take a step back and not ruin it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, you just got to follow it until it feels like that's enough. And then at the same time, we go back in, sometimes it's scary because it's like, how are we going to find that same feeling and jump into that same world? I guess if it's been like, I don't know, it's like a lot of the time why I don't like re-recording things, which is a nightmare, because I usually just put down like demo vocals on like an SM7 or whatever and just be like doing that. And then we might have the track done and then it's like, oh, well, you should record it on like a different mic and like just because of noise and stuff. But I just love that it's captured in the moment with the emotion exactly raw as it was. And I think I just love keeping as much of that moment in there as possible. Yeah, I don't know.
You mentioned therapy before, and it sounds like there's a real therapeutic sort of element to the recording.
Fully, yeah.
What are things that you've kind of, especially with that process of like writing stuff down and then later realizing what it's about, what are things that you've surprised yourself with or like learned about yourself through that process of writing and recording?
I guess like, say you're in a really bad like a bit of a spiral, or if you've like kind of just lost yourself a little bit, I feel like music has definitely become or been that thing that's like a diary almost of like, okay, even if you're not aware, it's keeping track of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, right, remember when this was you? Remember when that happened? How did you get here? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a thing. And like even when you need a reality check a little bit, it comes in, it definitely does that. Where I think like The Sky Is Bleeding, especially like that EP, looking back there, I'm like, there's some tracks that just make me so sad to listen back to.
Right.
But it's like, because I knew the headspace and the place that I was at with myself then, that at the time I don't feel like I even really had the capacity to look at. But I think like listening back now, it's almost like there's a smaller yourself inside yourself being like, hey, like this is going on, trying to wake you up a bit. Do you know what I mean? So I think listening back to some of those stuff, it's like, fuck, okay, I think your music knows yourself a bit more than you give it credit sometimes. But yeah, I don't know, I think things like that have surprised me. Yeah,
so the smaller self sort of manages to find its way into the music even when you don't necessarily know that it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's the thing that brings you back a little bit, I think, or is trying to, even when everything else has failed. You're like, music is still like just bring you back to reality a little bit, I think.
Yeah. So with Bubblegum, it sounds like there's been a sort of change in the tone and some of the stuff that you've been putting out. I wondered when did you start recording that?
Bubblegum, when did we start recording that? When did I start doing that? That would have been this year.
Okay.
Was it this year? Time is just so confusing at the minute. Yeah, I think it was this year, earlier this year. It was made with a bunch of different producers. Hazy Eyes, Andrew Wells, Zach, obviously, and Aaron Shadrow. Made in different places. It's cool. It's kind of like a bit of a, I guess, like time capsule of a lot of different moments that have happened. It's
What about the format? Because I thought the fact that it's a mixtape. The other things you've released have always been EPs. So I wondered what the choice to name it that is.
I think because it feels like it's a step in a different direction, I guess. Whereas like the EPs were always, I don't know, it felt like they were in their own worlds, whereas this feels like a bridge to something else.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of the reason for it. Also, it's longer than the other ones. So before the like album, I guess I wanted to like bridge over. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think's created that bridge of like, you know, because I guess you could have made something that continues on another EP or something, but it does feel like a sort of lateral move rather than a necessarily like a straightforward like here's the next chapter of what I'm already doing in a sense. What caused that sort of jump?
I guess it was just like the collection of sounds feels more. All the rest of the EPs, the collection of sounds in them have like always had like a stream through them.
Yeah.
They make sense in the same world. And I think these do too make sense in the same world, but they're all very different tracks. And they're kind of like an overlook of like a lot of the sounds that I want to bring into, I don't know, what's next, rather than being like, this is its own world, separate, chapters done kind of a thing. It's more like a new book almost.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I wondered what your relationship is like with genre, because it sort of feels like a slightly outdated idea, but at the same time it's like inescapable in a way. It's like everything sort of, even if it's talking about how something is genreless or you know, all these words to describe the fact that it doesn't fit into a genre, I guess that in itself is still a genre.
Yeah.
What do you think of that concept of genre?
I think genre, I think is important to acknowledge for sure. And it's like interesting to look at the influences as well. Like I feel like when I look back, it always makes sense with the stuff that I'm listening to or kind of the worlds that I'm in and exposed to. So I feel like it does have, like I don't think it should be written off as a thing. But I think as well it's interesting to fuse sounds and to make new things from that, do you know what I mean, and not be so strict with it all the time. I like the idea that you can't tie music down too much, but if you had to understand it in a certain genre, I'm sure you could, do you know what I mean? Yeah
because it feels like a lot of music now is more about a specific mood or rather than kind of like, well, we've used this particular drum break so therefore it fits into this or
But I think like in the way as well that it's like it's interesting to break it down in genres, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because it's like I think the history of the genres is just such an interesting thing to look at. And if you start to be like none of it matters, then I think then you miss out on really understanding why a sound sounds a certain way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You remove a lot of context.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's about removing that at all. I think it's more like, why do these two work so well together? Like how do we bring it to a new place?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It also makes us think, I guess, a lot of genres while they were developing, the artists within them might not have necessarily, like I'm pretty sure neo-soul, people who are neo-soul were rejecting that when it was happening.
Right.
Whereas now it's quite defined in
what it is. Yeah.
These Erykah Badu and D'Angelo and stuff go into that
bracket
category.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like I remember, I guess like grime was like that, where there was a lot of time where it was like, what is it? And now it is accepted as that. So I guess it's sometimes while a genre is forming, there's not necessarily a clear name for it, or the artists don't want to take that name.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, maybe it's because it feels like at times maybe it puts you into a bit of a box,
Yeah.
which no one ever wants, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I don't know, I feel like there's also like a badge of honor, I guess, with like a lot of them too, with genres. If you do it really well, if you're really good at the one sound that you do,
Yeah.
it's like an incredible thing to be like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no one's going to question an artist for being really good at a genre and saying, why aren't they doing this complete other thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think with your music, it genre, I think, comes up or is interesting because, like, for example, and I don't know if this is true, but I was reading that you only started to use rap because you were kind of in freestyle sort of like sessions and stuff. It wasn't necessarily from a deliberate thing of like, well, I'm gonna, like, I've been studying all this rap, so I'm gonna use it. And now sort of like moving in, using more, I guess, dance and electronic elements and stuff. It's really interesting, I think, the way that you've kind of come across different genres and kind of worked with them.
Yeah.
With the new stuff, I guess the dancier elements of it, I wondered what inspired the kind of that.
I feel like it's always the music that I'm listening to that feeds it a lot. Yeah, and it always kind of has been. And I feel like it's the dancier stuff, I guess, just came from a place of like wanting to make something that feels like it's moving and it feels good to play live, in a way of like you can push certain elements of it. Not that the rest of this stuff doesn't feel good to play live, but I think this is like, I wanted to bring that energy into that, I guess. Not consciously, but then it just feels good to play live. I think with Switch and stuff like that, when I started to play that live, I was like, this is sick.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be great to be able to move more on stage and everything else. But yeah, it's a huge thing to the producers that I work with too. Because I feel like, I mean, I always go back, my mind always goes back to Zach. But it's just like, with him as well, and we'd share a lot of music to each other. And I guess like we'll just kind of be in the same headspace with it. And so he's kind of like gone down that route as well. So yeah, we just kind of just making music that you want to listen to. Yeah.
Following the pandemic, it does feel like a lot of people want to be back into the body and back into like movement. And I wondered whether that at all, even maybe slightly subconsciously, was an influence.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. Just wanting to be in like a sweaty room.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Bubblegum, the title, where did you come up with that from? What made you want to call the record that? The mixtape?
I just think the whole thing sounds like, I don't know, like it's sweet, but it's very like fragile in places. I just love the word bubblegum too. I feel like it feels good in my mouth. So I'm like, yeah, it's cute. I don't know. I don't feel like there's huge intention behind it with the name, but it just felt right for the project.
There's quite a long lead into it because it comes out in like March.
It's kind of January actually.
January, okay.
Yeah.
But it still is quite a, I feel like a lot of people now like to just announce that the record's coming out in 4 days or whatever and it's here.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels like there's been a bit more of a, you're like putting songs out and letting them live. Like, what made you want to take that sort of process with it?
Well, I think because I hadn't released music in so long.
Yeah.
Until Fun. And then after that, I was just so desperate to put music out. So I'm like, okay, let's just put them out and let them have their own lives before living in a project. So that's kind of where it came from, I guess. Because, yeah, it feels like a mad thing when you haven't released for ages, but you've got all this music and you've listened to it for so long. So you feel like the world has heard it, but they haven't. And you feel like they've, I don't know, it just kind of sometimes feels like you're holding them hostage a little bit. And you're like, just gonna like go live your lives. So yeah, I think that is one of the reasons why we're putting out like that. We actually wanted to release more this year than we have, but it's okay. We'll come out next year. Yeah.
What about that gap with the release and stuff? Does that put pressure on you at all, or does it add to the weight of the release and make it like it has to do more because it's taken so long to release, or are you still kind of all right with?
I feel like at this point, like, when a release date has been set, it's like, okay, cool, that's going to come out then. I don't really look at it or think about it, even when it has released. It'll kind of like, it feels like good, it feels like a relief when it's out. But I think the worst thing is to like consistently look back and be like, oh, how's it doing? How's this? Like, I just feel like I want to keep moving. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, even with all this scheduled, it feels so good to know that it's all going out. But I'm already like in write mode of like, okay, what else is there? Do you know what I mean? To put out, and what else is there to write? Like, what else wants to come out?
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels really good, but I just don't get too stuck on it now.
Okay.
Where I'm like, yeah.
Was there ever a time that you did sort of get stuck on that when it's come out, keeping an eye on how it's doing and following social media and all that kind of thing?
All of that kind of stuff. Maybe at the very, very start.
Right.
Like SoundCloud days, a little bit. And also, actually, I feel like there's a part of me that thought I would jinx it if I kept looking at it. Because it's like watching kettle boil kind of thing. You're like, is it ever going to... Whereas I feel like the best thing to do is just like let it do its thing. And hopefully it also doesn't matter. Yeah, I think it's just like that thing of just let it live its life and not put too many expectations on it. And not like consistently like critique how it's doing. Because it's just better if it just don't look back.
Yeah. Especially in this kind of era of music, because I feel like the song you least expect to be the massive hit will be the one that blows up, and you'll have no control really over what that is.
That's true.
When do you think that you learned to not put too much expectation on, or have you always been like that?
I feel like I can't remember when, I guess, it happened. But yeah, I think it's always been in my mind a little bit of like, I don't want... Because I feel like it's that thing of like, you never want that to be the reason that you put out music. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that thing of like just staring at the numbers and being like, I don't know, it just feels a little bit too... Like you're putting too much pressure on the song to do something. Whereas like, I don't know, I feel like if you've done your best with something, you just gotta let it do its thing and hope that something will happen to it, I guess. But just like keep moving. Also, I don't like getting stuck in the
like the sort of career side of it almost.
Yeah, a little bit. It's incredible to be able to do it as a career, and I love it so much. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think it's that thing of like, I also want to make sure that I remember that I would do it no matter what. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's like the thing of like, when you start to look at it too much like I don't know, something that you put pressure on, that you're like, this has to do well, and if it doesn't do well, then everything's over. It's like, it's a song. It's like if you've done the best you can with a song, leave it do its thing. Just making sure that I'm not getting lost in that kind of headspace of like, just losing the fact that you just love to do it. Yeah. For the fact that like how well something does. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever come close to that? Because it feels like it's quite easy to, especially when you're sort of first blowing up and there's like magazine shoots to do and shows to do and songs coming out. It's quite easy to get caught up in all of that and sort of like lose that focus of or the fact that you, as you said, you would do it even without all of that stuff. I think it is really easy to just get carried away into the other stuff and get quite lost. Do you feel like you've ever come close to that?
I feel like maybe when there was a stretch of like writing a lot, but it was almost like every day was booked out.
Right.
And I loved part of it, but then another part of me was just like, feels a little bit like I'm trying to force something to come out every day, and not just like taking my time with it, and not like, I don't know, just like felt like, how do you describe it? just draining it, I guess, instead of nurturing it. And I think at that point I was like, okay, I'm just going to take a step back for a bit and just remember that I love to do it, rather than just like, okay, well, we need this right now because like, I just feel like once you get into that headspace, it's just it's the worst.
Yeah.
I think there are definitely moments of it, but then it's just, I think, a reality check of like, actually what, I think live shows bring that back as well, to be honest, where you're just like, what is it all for? Like, what am I doing? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of, you feel it again in a room and you're like, oh, okay, of course, that's what, like,
yeah,
that's why.
And it sounds like you maybe need to live between studio sessions. You can't just do, with the way that you work, you can't just go in every day, or you won't have anything really to write about. It sounds like you need time to yourself outside of it.
Yeah, I think so. Because otherwise I feel like I'll just run out a little bit. Battery will like go get low.
Yeah.
Saying that though, I haven't been in the studio in a minute. I want to go back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do to nurture the creativity? Like you said, what do you do sort of outside of the studio to like look after yourself, or to make sure that when you're in the studio you're gonna have material and you're gonna be the best that you can be in the studio?
I think like, I don't know, I guess like definitely given time to relationships and everything else, I feel like it's something that I'm really trying to prioritize right now, especially because I'm finally landing. So I'm like, okay, let me just come out of isolation a bit, and it's gonna be nice. It'll be really good. And then what else do I do? Go for walks. So just start to like enjoy small things as well. I think just little self-care things. I feel like I'm just so drawn to chaos though, that sometimes that sounds like a luxury. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
A little bit, where you're like, I try not to go to the pub as much,
right.
which is good. I like going on little adventures. I love meeting new people and kind of just thinking back on like people that I've met in the last year, and just, I don't know, like going on little things like that. I feel like living freely, I guess, outside of it, that really inspires a lot. Just like not really thinking too much about where you're going or what you're doing with a person. Just like, it feels good.
Yeah.
I don't know. That made sense.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you think that like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about has been about ways of getting yourself to be able to think freely and stuff? Do you think that you've ever had a tendency to overthink, and that's what you're moving
For
away
sure.
from? Yeah.
Yeah. To overthink, definitely. I think I get lost in my head a lot.
Right.
Probably with that kind of shit. So I just feel like, yeah, I definitely do. But I don't know, pros and cons with it, to be honest. I feel like, yeah, like the overthinking thing can be kind of stressful. I think especially when it just like, when it takes over a bit. But I think that taking time out and like just getting to talk to people a bit more and like seeing friends and stuff just brings you back down, where I can feel like I get lost so easily up here when someone needs, like, you just need to reroute and just like get a grasp on what's going on, so you don't get too lost in it. I don't know. Yeah.
You mentioned being drawn to chaos before, which that was a phrase that I really sort of, what do you mean by that, or like what does that tend to sort of look like?
It's I don't know, I think it's always been, I think it's in my blood, to be honest, just drawn to chaos. I think it's just like constantly kind of just following the like following a spark, or following, do you know what I mean, where it's like, I think I love going out.
Yeah.
I love going out. I'm not so much anymore, which is good, but I think sometimes I can get a bit lost in that, and I just love just that whole thing of adventure, and also like the upside down of reality. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing where there's like one thing going on that, how do I describe it? I felt there's two sides to a city or two sides to a place.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And one is where you're here and everything's very calm and everything's got its place and it's very like what the simulation of life should be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's the other side of it where it's like, I don't know, where there's just like not that many rules and time doesn't work the same way. And like there's, I don't know how to describe it. Like it's just, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you just kind of meet characters and just go off with them. And it's a bit of a mad time. It's good though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just feel like you can always see like there's just two sets of...
Right.
Yeah.
And you were sort of battling between the two, I guess, because you talked about being settled and being...
Well, I'm really trying.
So you're trying to stay on the first one, but you tend to flip into the
second one.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping, though. This is like the first while I'm going to be able to settle.
What are the most difficult things you've had to overcome in your career so far? What have been like the biggest obstacles for you, and how do you think that you've managed to sort of overcome them?
I guess like trusting that if your instinct tells you that something's not right, to go with it is something that I feel like is really, I've had to like really delve into. Because even if everything feels like, I don't know, I think you just need to know when something's not right and kind of follow that. I think not looking back at tracks, because like I was saying before, like for example, when a track does really, really well and there's a lot of pressure to maybe like follow that track up with another one exactly like that, making sure that you stick to your guns a little bit, or be like a bit like, okay, I'm not going to let that affect the process.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge a little bit sometimes, but I think it's important. And I think, to be honest, like, yeah, I think like 9/8 and everyone have been like a huge blessing in that way as well, because I feel like they've really helped me a lot lose my head with it. Do you know what I mean? And they've been a bit of a grounding point throughout all of it, where I've still got like my team as well, and we can always kind of talk about everything whenever anything comes up. I guess just trusting that you're doing the right thing or making the right decision is always like the hardest bit, but you just got to go with instinct, I think.
What do you think has sort of like helped you to make that realization, or to like learn to go with instinct and learn to sort of trust your gut on it?
I think situations before where I haven't,
right,
and then have kind of ended up being like, oh, I should have listened to myself. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I should have listened to that. And it happens with everything, I guess, like with any relationship or with any kind of career probably as well. There's going to be moments where you're just like, okay, right, this isn't working, but on paper everything seems fine, and then you just gotta, yeah. So yeah, there's definitely been moments like that, but I feel like overall I've had a pretty easy ride. Yeah. So far, I think.
What are you most proud of about what you've achieved so far?
Most proud of, I guess like I just keep thinking about like make my mom proud, I guess. That's been a big part of it. Really just making a career out of it, from like where I started to where I am in general, is just something that I feel like I'm always really proud of. And like understanding who I am through it and getting through some tough shit, so just some tough times, and still being able to still have my feet on the ground. Yeah. Yeah.
When do you think that you realised that you'd made your mum proud, or like what's her reaction been to sort of everything that you're doing now?
I think she still doesn't really understand it. She's like, yeah, well, just, I don't know. But I think she, just like, she came to the show on Thursday.
Right.
So watching her there, she literally got like the bang center, like, balcony seat. I was like, bro, please give me a chance. But yeah, she was there the whole time. So that, just like, moments of like, when I've spoken to her and she's like, oh yeah, like, I could just tell she's proud. And I think that's something that I've always wanted to see in her. So I think that's like something that makes me really happy.
Yeah.
I remember caught her watching a music video of mine once. I was like, what are you watching? She was like, nothing. She was really shy about it. I was like, bro, it's okay. And she was like, yeah, well, it's good. And I was like, thanks. She always tells me, you need to make more dancey ones, you know, more happy ones. I was like, yeah, I'll make some more happy ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, making her proud has been a really big achievement. So I'm proud of that. And you know what? And when I hear people at shows singing things back, or when I'm like, that shit does make me really proud as well. To know that like I could potentially, something that I've written could potentially do something for someone that it did for me back then.
Yeah.
That's like everything I've ever wanted. So
yeah.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Perfect. And lastly, like, what does success look like to you?
Success looks like leaving a positive impact, I think. Like being able to look back and be like, okay, that did something. And it changed the course of something. I think like that's really when I'm going to be like, cool, job done.
Thank you for listening to Making Conversation with Grant Brydon featuring Biig Piig. If you like this episode, then please be sure to rate, comment and subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts. You can listen to Biig Piig's brand new mixtape Bubblegum, available now on all streaming services. And check out my book, Life Lessons from Hip Hop, which is available from all good booksellers. Thank you to Levi's for welcoming us into Haus of Strauss to record, as well as Eroy Chan for the graphic design and John Phonics for the instrumental that I'm talking over right now. You can connect with me on social media at Grant Brydon and Biig Piig at Biig, BIIG _Pig, PIIG on all platforms.